South Korea is in the grip of political chaos at this hour as its embattled president Yoon Suk-yeol faces a possible impeachment vote amid calls to resign. Just a short time ago, protesters marched toward the president's office in Seoul. According to South Korean media, a vote on an impeachment bill is expected to happen Friday or Saturday. Yoon sparked the political crisis when he abruptly declared martial law late Tuesday, only to scrap that order under pressure a few hours later. Now, his defense minister and a number of other top officials have submitted resignations. Protesters, meantime, clashing with troops outside the parliament building after that emergency order was announced. And we also have video of a lawmaker arguing with a soldier, which has gone viral. Take a look. You'll see why. As you saw there, she tried to grab the soldier's rifle before walking away. She was shouting, "Aren't you embarrassed?" Just hours after, meantime, South Korea's president plunged the country into political uncertainty. Life actually appears to be carrying on as usual. That's what we're hearing from CNN's Ivan Watson, who's been out there speaking with lawmakers in Seoul.
In fact, a member of the president's own political party told me he doesn't see how it's possible that President Yoon can continue to govern after the fiasco of the last 12 hours, where he declared martial law. There were soldiers that tried to prevent lawmakers from gathering in the middle of the night in the National Assembly, and yet they did. They voted 190 of them to overturn the martial law, and that included 18 lawmakers from the president's own party. And then before dawn this morning, the president backtracked and lifted martial law. It lasted around 6 hours. So now what we have is the opposition calling for his resignation. And look where I am right now. It's a protest led by a large labor union. Francois is going to pan the camera over here. This is in one part of Seoul where you have hundreds of people gathered at a candlelight vigil here, holding signs demanding the president's resignation. And we've seen another similar protest in front of the National Assembly today. I think what's so striking is that amid this political upheaval, the country seems to be functioning as usual. I flew in, landed at the main airport, Incheon Airport. It was functioning normally. No extra kind of security presence on the ground. The streets were busy. The businesses were open. People are certainly talking about this. The stock market here took a dip about 2% and then came back up. But the main opposition parties are drafting up a resolution to try to impeach the president, which could be presented as early as tomorrow.
And our thanks to Ivan Watson there. Also want to take you now to my colleague, Mike Valerio, who is in Seoul. So you were really, Mike, you were in the thick of those crowds during those very chaotic few hours. Quieting down at this point, understandably, how did things change as we were learning more as that order was lifted?
Erica, I think that it's a sigh of relief that's been palpable as people learn that the president and the military were no longer going to be in charge, both of those entities, of the entire country here of South Korea. So you can feel that relief through all corners of society. And we saw the tableau that Ivan Watson set up a couple seconds ago. But a lot of the protesters, it's a night and day situation compared to what we saw yesterday, the images that you're seeing on the screen right now, where we saw chaos at the heart of South Korea's democracy at the National Assembly. Now peace has been restored, with people so grateful from all walks of life that we are not going back to a time when there was military rule as recently as 40 years ago in 1980. So where we go from here, I think it's important for people around the world to understand that even though we don't have this acute moment anymore, this could last months. The president has one of two options, either resign or face impeachment. He's been told to resign before the weekend, and then if he doesn't, impeachment proceedings will go forward. And what that means, Erica, if the president were to stand up and fight this impeachment that he could very well be facing, South Korea would have an interim president who would be Prime Minister Han. He would step into that role. And that would mean we would have somewhat of a lame duck to represent South Korea on the world stage. President-elect Donald Trump is going to take office in January. One of the things I think is important for people to understand is that the president-elect is certainly intent on renegotiating how much South Korea pays for key American troops who maintain the security situation and the security presence, a bastion, a security guarantee against North Korea, and a counterweight to China. So if you have a lame duck president representing the people of South Korea as the president-elect, could be asking for billions of dollars more, that could set up an unstable dynamic here that the government in Seoul has to deal with. There's also, wrapping up here, Erica, the question of what, if anything, North Korea could do to take advantage of this political instability. And more analysts we talk to, Erica, are saying, you know what? North Korea may do nothing. They may try to use this moment to say that in very relative terms, Erica, they are the stable nation here on the Korean Peninsula. And if they were to make some sort of provocation in the next few days and weeks to take advantage of this situation, they could be playing into the current president of South Korea's hands when he instituted this declaration of martial law, saying that, you know, North Korean influence in the government is one of the reasons why he wanted to take the heavy measures that he did yesterday. So watch this space as to who is going to be leading the country over the next few weeks and months, and what do our neighbors to the north do in this moment, Erica?
Yeah, so many questions which will linger. As you've noted, Mike, really appreciate the reporting. Thank you. Well, as for the White House, it says it's relieved President Yoon reversed course on that declaration of martial law. A National Security Council spokesman went on to say the United States will continue to monitor the situation. President Biden, of course, is wrapping up his visit to Angola, has yet to say much publicly about the events. He and President Yoon have met numerous times. Biden has called him a great friend. CNN's Arlette Saenz is traveling with President Biden, joins us now from Angola. So this move to introduce martial law came as a huge surprise to many around the world, including apparently the Biden administration. Not a ton of reaction publicly, but as I understand it, there are some concerns privately about what this could mean.
Yeah, there certainly are. And this came as a huge shock to President Biden and U.S. officials, as a National Security Council spokesperson said that the U.S. received no advance notification of President Yoon's initial decision to declare martial law. Now, the White House yesterday was expressing relief that Yoon decided to lift that martial law order after the parliament had voted to block it. But officials have been viewing this with serious concern, even as they have very few spoken out publicly about it. For President Biden's part, he was briefed while he was traveling here in Angola, but we have yet to hear from him directly about this situation, which involves one of the United States' closest allies, who has been central to the U.S. strategy in bolstering alliances in the Indo-Pacific. But today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was traveling in Brussels, weighing in for the first time, really the first U.S. official to weigh in a public manner, where he said that the U.S. had viewed this with some concern, but he also really refrained from directly criticizing South Korean President Yoon. Take a listen to what he had to say.
In our judgment, any political disagreements need to be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law. Korea is one of the most powerful stories in the world about the emergence of democracy and democratic resilience. And we'll continue to look to Korea to set that example.
Now, for President Biden's part, we have yet to hear from him. It's a rather curious decision, given the fact that he has staked so much of his presidency, his political career, on the need to protect democracy and protect democratic institutions, both at home and abroad. Perhaps they are trying to give South Korean President Yoon some space in this situation, but we will see whether the White House has anything further to say, especially as the president's wrapping up his trip here in Angola.